I remember sitting on the table, them saying I should have died. Some kind of switch turned off in my head. If I died today, what the hell was all of that about? On paper, my careers look very different. The common thread connecting them is service. At the end of the day, I want my work to matter. Grew up in a strict household in Samoa, so I was always asking myself, why not? Why not do the thing that scares you? Why not go see the places that people only read about in books? So far, I've gone to 14 countries and hiked Mount Fuji. I plan to see more of it. So that why not mindset is still what pushes me forward every day.
For today's episode, I am here with one of my very good friends. She's probably one of my first friends growing up. That's how long I've known Jackie. So before we do anything, this is something I always ask all my guests. And so I'm going to ask you the same thing. So who is Jacqueline Ale?
I'm just a simple person. I'm someone who loves being outside and experiencing life with my wife, Nadine. I'm someone who values loyalty and family. So the military is a big part of my life, but it's not like the whole story. I am a technical sergeant and a medical professional, but at home I'm just Jackie. Watch a lot of anime. I watch a lot of HGTV. I'm learning how to cook healthier, and sometimes I sit right here in front of my laptop planning future trips with Nadine. We just got back from Paris about a month ago, so at my core, I'm still the same girl who you grew up with, just wanting to see what was out there in the world. And no matter, I never want to lose that part of me.
I love that. You're one of my most adventurous friends that's always giving everything. You've done a lot of sports and you've also changed careers over your lifetime too. Now you are a technical sergeant in the Air Force. So take us through the evolution of what initially you wanted to start or wanted to be and
Sure.
then how it evolved.
Sure. After college, I worked at a bank, and then I went into selling insurance, and then I went to the VA administration. And then finally, I'm where I'm at right now, serving in the military and working at a level 1 trauma center. So on paper, I feel like my careers probably look very different. But for me, the common thread connecting them is service. Respiratory therapy is about helping people on life support. The military is about supporting the nation and protecting others. And I feel like what ties all of those chapters together is the desire to be of service. I may not be the loudest person in the room, but I try to be someone that people can count on, because at the end of the day, I want my work to matter.
What's the most fulfilling thing so far in terms of the work you're doing?
As a respiratory therapist, my ventilator is essentially the life support machine. And because of that, I see people during some of the most vulnerable moments of their lives. And what stays with me isn't always like the medical complexities of patient or the sexy procedures and surgeries like you see on TV shows. It's the human moments. It's a family member squeezing your hand or realizing that the work you're doing might be the difference between someone making it home or not. My role as an RT is only just like one piece of a person's recovery story. Sometimes it's a cameo and sometimes it's part of the main cast, but it's continuing God's work of healing, and that part of it will never get old.
My niece is currently in ICU. It's opened my eyes. I give lots of props to the medical staff because there's like a primary nurse, then there's like a nurse just for the ECMO, there's the heart specialist, the kidney specialist. There's so many doctors, so
Yeah.
many people that come in.
You probably met an RT too.
Yes, I
Yeah.
have. And they come in and they're constantly monitoring the machine. And I'm looking at these machines and it's like, oh my gosh, like there's so much data in there. And this is just one person's body. And I see so many things hanging up. And there's so many different people working behind the scene to help keep you alive and how complex the body is. One day it just seems stable. The next minute it's just like going crazy. Sometimes when the doctors come in with all the different jargons that they got going on, I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, I have no idea what they're saying. I think of my cousin and she handles it well. She's starting to learn the terminology. But for me, having to hear it for the first time, it's
Mhm.
so overwhelming. How have you been able to really help another family or another person when they're just kind of sitting in with their loved ones?
So I haven't always been in medicine. I've only been doing this since 2019, and this wasn't anything that I wanted to do and anything that I didn't see myself doing, but here I am. So
Mhm.
I've also had family members in the hospital, and see family members even still yet, because of where I'm located in Hawaii. I think because I'm able to relate to that part where I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know these terminologies. I didn't know what those numbers meant. I just knew that, my family member was sick, and having to trust these people that I don't even know and taking care of a family member that means a lot to me. How do you do that? And so for me, when I'm in those situations, it's just real with people. I don't have the kind of style where I'm doing like customer service where you have to put on, a front or whatever. I'm just real with people. I talk to them and I try to break it down, especially if I'm in the room and I hear the doctors speak in medical jargon that, regular people outside the medicine don't know. So when they leave the room, like I'm still in there, and, I'll talk to them. If they're sitting down, like I'll get down on their level and speak with them and tell them what it is, at least on my end. Like
Yeah.
I'm a respiratory therapist, so I'm a lung specialist. Lungs is like my area. That's my zone. So that's what I know. I can't speak to other things, but I kind of explain it, especially because like my machine is usually like the biggest machine in the room. And it's like, very intimidating. So explaining it to them what these numbers mean, where we need to keep it. And if the numbers show this or that, it's great. So just keep an eye on that. Sometimes they can hear you. And actually sometimes I even ask them for their help, because when the patient is awake and aware, they don't know me, they don't know my voice, but I need them to react a certain way so that way I can do my job. And so I'll ask the family members for their help. I ask them, I need you to tell them to calm down. I need you to tell
Yeah.
them to take a big deep breath, things like that.
One thing that I learned, it's being on a ventilator can be really hard because it's so uncomfortable for people. For my niece, they actually had to sedate her because she was having a hard time having to breathe. Like you have to learn to cope with the machines.
Yeah, you have a tube down your throat and that's helping your lungs breathe, and sometimes you're kind of breathing against it. It's not natural. Sedating patients is just a more effective way to help them relax, so that way their lungs also don't have to do a lot of work, that your lungs can also rest. So, let the ventilator breathe for you.
When I think respiratory, I'm thinking of breathing. Is
Mhm.
there anything particular that maybe everyone should be more aware of? Lung health. What does lung health look like? Or is there a breathing technique that I should know of that I could just kind of like help improve my lungs?
Don't smoke. Like, don't do that. Don't vape. To each their own. Everybody has their own vice. It's just for me, like smoking is so bad for you. It is so bad for your health. And vaping is like a new thing. So people say it's not, that it's not healthy for you. And there aren't a lot of data to cut that yet because it's so new. Whereas lung disease, lung cancer, that's like decades and decades of research. All this data piled from all these experiments or research that are compiled to show you that, lung cancer can be developed by bad habits like smoking. Or vaping is like relatively new, but it's the same. And for me, I see so many people in the hospitals that are there because of lifestyle choices, things that you can fully control. Sometimes you can't control things like a brain aneurysm or other different types of cancer, but with your lungs, that's something that you can control. Simply one advice I would say is like, don't pick up smoking, don't vape, don't be around other people who are smoking, because, secondhand smoking is a thing because it affects everything. If you're smoking, you can quit, because what happens is your lungs is actually one organ that can actually regenerate. It can recuperate. It can, go back to being like normal, and you can live a healthier life moving forward. But if you're like continuing to smoke, it's terrible because it's a decision.
Well, let's be real. We both grew up in a time where everyone was smoking. Some of our friends are definitely big smokers, especially growing up in Samoa. A lot of people smoke this, right? And so, how do
Yeah.
you tell someone who's just like, but this is like my therapy, this is keeps me going?
I mean, at the end of the day, like I'll still say it, whether they listen or not, I'll still say it, because at the end of the night, I could sleep, by saying that I at least tried or I did something. I didn't just walk by and notice somebody giving themselves cancer and not saying anything. So I'll tell people straight up that smoking is really bad for your health. I wish they could see the things that I've seen and the things that it does to your lungs. I've actually seen someone's actual lung after, smoking for so long. And this is something that can be preventable. It's preventative. There are other things that you can do that could be just as addictive and probably, more healthy than smoking.
Maybe someone's like, "Well, I can't quit now because my lungs are never gonna recuperate," but I love that you said that lungs are probably the only organs that can come back, so there's hope based on what you're telling me.
I'm not gonna bash my information into someone's head. I'm gonna say my piece and they can do what they want with it.
For someone who's watching, what's the difference working as respiratory therapist as a civilian versus working in the military?
Well, in simple terms, my job in the military is to keep critically ill or injured patients alive and stable while we fly them from one place to another. I'm part of a three-man team. It's called Critical Care Air Transport Team. And we essentially turn an entire aircraft into a flying ICU. And the patients that we transport are often on mechanical ventilators, sometimes on multiple medications to support their heart and blood pressure, and occasionally even on advanced life support systems like ECMO. My responsibility is the airway and the lungs. So I manage the ventilator, I monitor blood gases, I adjust oxygen and ventilator strategies, and I work closely with the physician and critical care nurses to keep the patient stable for the entire flight.
Mhm.
And my civilian job in the hospital as well as a respiratory therapist is similar, except the resources that are available to me in a hospital are more robust in comparison to what I have on hand or in my bags in an aircraft. So, and both the mission is the same: keep the patients stable and alive.
That would seem more difficult. I would assume some patients are conscious, some maybe not. I feel like there's a moving aircraft happening at the same time. Like things happening that just makes the job a whole lot harder. Yeah,
It does. It does
crazy.
make it a little bit more difficult, yeah. Because like in a hospital, you have everybody's there. Labs there, X-ray techs there, CT scan, MRI, and doctors from every specialty are all in this hospital. Whereas on the aircraft, you have one doc, one nurse, and a respiratory therapist.
When you're transporting like patients, what's the longest like you've ever been in the air?
So my military side, I'm not actually deployed yet. We train constantly and are put in intense training environments, which include, flying in an aircraft with like mannequins and in your team, and they're just like throwing everything at you, all these scenarios, this and that. So what could be like an hour or two could feel like 20-hour shift because
Yeah.
it's like you're sweating and you're looking for stuff and things that would probably not happen in real life. They still throw it at you because they just want to see how you react and they want to see how you would, handle things in the best way possible. Then again, you never know. Things happen. So maybe 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours of a flight. Some flights in the military, you can travel 7 to 8 hours, depending on where you're starting from and where you're going. We pick patients up from a low level point of care and transport them to somewhere else where there's more doctors there, there's more resources there. So that flight could take as long as like 10 to 13 hours,
It's
depending on
crazy.
where they are and where they need to go.
I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you, and I was like, I never thought Jackie was ever gonna be in the military growing. Did you ever see yourself being in the military?
No, no, I did not. It kind of just found me. I joined the military at 35. After leaving Samoa, life moved kind of fast. I went from Washington State to the Caribbean to Michigan to Vegas to Seattle and then, eventually here in Hawaii. I grew up in a very strict household in Samoa, so I was that kid always asking myself, why not? But quietly in my head because I think saying it out loud might have gotten me in trouble. And I think that curiosity, pushed me to experience life on the extreme end of the spectrum. Like there was no middle ground, there was no moderation. And that would get me into trouble because there was like a whole part of my life, years of my life that I can't fully account for. It feels like a blur because I think I was just chasing that feeling through partying and trying to experience everything all at once. And along the way, I made a lot of mistakes and hurt a few people. But as I've gotten older, I've had to face those choices and learn from them and become more intentional about the person I'm becoming. So at 35 years old is when I decided to join the military to see what else I was capable of. And I chose to do medicine because At the time, I was caregiving for my parents. And I didn't know anything medical like you didn't know what these terminology was. I didn't know what their medications did. I just knew how to drive them to their appointments. So after taking the ASVAB, that had like a buffet of choices of jobs that I could choose from. And I chose medicine just because I thought it would be like a life skill that I would do.
Talking about like your aspirations, let's like continue the conversation about home, like growing up in Samoa and how that kind of like shaped who you are. And I think we were talking about freedom, like having like you got a point to where you got to experience a few things. What is something that you could look back at yourself and you could tell that that younger you? What would that be?
I think growing up Afghasi was something that's definitely hard. Not speaking the language was also hard. Don't regret none of it. Samoa will always be home, but there were definitely some challenges. I think I would tell her to to still have that same curiosity in asking myself why not. So my grandmother was a big inspiration in my life, and she lived to be 90 years old, and I'm 41 now. And sometimes I think if I also live to be 90, that means I have nearly 50 more years to experience life and explore God's creation. So why not? Why not do the thing that scares you? Why not
Mhm.
go see the places that people only read about in books or in the Bible? Like the River Jordan where Jesus was baptized, or the Red Sea that Moses parted, to escape Ramesses. These places actually exist. So far I've gone to 14 countries and I plan to see more of it, with Nadine. So the younger version of me, I think, believed that the world was bigger than where I came from. Like I said, I grew up in a very strict household, and I still carry that belief today. I think the difference now is that my ambition has direction. Back then, it was just energy and dreams. Now it's discipline, purpose, and responsibility. So that why not mindset is still what pushes me forward every day.
I like that. I feel like ever since we left the islands, you and I have kind of always met at different seasons of our life. But I remember one time when we met up and you had mentioned about getting into a car accident and how that transformed your life. So I thought that was so profound because sometimes like she is partying hard, living her life. But I remember that conversation going, "Oh, wow. It seems like this is like a turning point for her." Is that something that you would be open to talk about?
Yeah, sure. I think it was kind of around that that crazy period of my life where I was trying to live life on like one extreme end of the spectrum. I was 25 years old. So I was living in Seattle, worked up in Linwood, and I was driving north to go to work, and I got off the freeway to turn left to drive straight into my job, going straight down the road. And I didn't see the red light. I think maybe the sun. I wasn't on my phone. Texting wasn't a thing back then. There was no social media. So I was just driving and T-boned this van. And I don't remember much else after that. I do remember just seeing the airbag, seeing smoke, not being able to see out my windshield because my hood was just like straight up. Car was totaled and I was taken to the hospital. I remember the paramedic saying something like, if like he doesn't know how I'm still alive because that accident was pretty bad. And say I called Sinky and she actually came to the scene and took some pictures. And I remember her saying the same thing. It was a really bad accident. Car was completely totaled. And at the ER, I remember they had me in this ridiculous gown sitting on the table, and them saying all of this, and doing their whole workup and checkup and all I kept hearing in my head was them telling me that I should have died. I should have died. And then when they left me in the room by myself to get dressed, some kind of switch turned off in my head because I was like, I'm 25 years old right now. If I die today, what the hell was all of that about? 25 years of like experiencing life and going through, mistakes and going through hardships or going through happiness and just doing all the things. Why did I go through all that? What was the point? And what about all my future aspirations and all the things that I dream about and things that I want to do? What about those? If I die today, then what? So I think that switch went off in my head and I started living life to like the extreme. Instead of staying in one lane, I was in all these lanes all at once because life is too short to stay in one lane if you know you're capable of doing more.
That
That's
was
something.
a lot. I remember you telling me that, and you weren't just saying that, I did see, like, a lot of difference in you. You have come a long way, you're also in a different season of your life, now you're a married woman, and so it's interesting because we've all been friends for quite some time, and how did it bloom into becoming what it is today?
You and I, we've been friends a long time, right? So you and
So
I
we've
have been
all been
friends.
friends.
Yeah, yes. Well, you and I have been friends a very long time. So I probably met you like,
We're in
um,
2nd grade?
yeah, yeah. But with Nadine and I, our story actually started, right? Samoa High School, go Sharks. We were both freshmen. I don't remember the exact conversation that Nadine and I had, but what always stood out to me that I'll always remember about her was her kindness. And then after high school, we both went to college in Washington State. She went to Evergreen College in Olympia, and I went to Washington State University in Pullman. Go Cougs! So a lot of people knew that. But what people don't know is that during college, I used to call Nadine and I used to ask her, "What are you doing with your life? Why aren't you out there making miracles or curing cancer or something that would benefit mankind?" She would always scoff at me and tell me to mind my own damn business because she was just out there living her life. Yet I still bothered her even after college with that same question because I don't know, I think like deep down inside, I just always knew that if anyone could, she could. And now I feel like she's living out my dream for her. Watching her go through nursing school and become a nurse has been one of the most inspiring things I have ever witnessed because I work very closely with nurses, both in my civilian and my military jobs. And believe me, nurses perform miracles every single day. I've seen it. So it makes me incredibly proud to just be a witness to the journey that I know God has in store for her. So yeah, 28 years later, it's been a pretty incredible journey.
I like that, and I always feel like that's what partnerships should always be. I mean, if I ever have an opportunity to be that blessed, is like that partnership where you both can grow together. Like you kind of build each other up. So I think that's been beautiful to see you guys do. And so I agree to just being around like the hospital now. I rarely see the doctors. Mostly the time I see the nurse, and they're changing this, making sure
Right.
like they're doing most of the work. So they're heroes for sure.
Agreed.
So the other thing I want to talk about is that adventurous nature of yours. I don't care to go climb a mountain. Do you climb mountains? Literally. And so, why? What's the excitement? What makes you motivated to go do all these things?
I think it's that same thing that I've always asked myself as a kid, why not? So my mother is part Japanese and her name is Fujiyama. She was named after Mount Fuji. And around the time I was 35, 34, I wanted to go to Japan and hike Mount Fuji. Wanted to do in honor of my mother. She was going through some health issues at the time. So I said I was going to do it. And when I say I'm going to do something, I lock myself into that. Like you said it, so you have to do it. And I put that on other people too, which is kind of my fault. And when people tell me they're going to do something, I expect that. I expect that that's what's going to happen. And so when they don't do something that they said they were going to do it, I just like, it doesn't make sense to me, like, why not? But you said you're going to do it. Why didn't you do it? Was also like a challenge. I remember going to breakfast with two friends and I told them I wanted to go and hike Mount Fuji. And they said, "No, you're not. You're not going to do that." And at that moment, I was like, in my head, not to tell them, I was like, yes, I fucking am now, you know?
Yeah, that is
Um,
so you.
yeah, it was like kind of like that. Don't tell me what I can and can't do. If I say I want to do something and you tell me I can't, that's going to be like, okay, now I'm going to do it. I actually messaged one of my good friends from college. Shout out to Suzanne. And I told her, "Hey, I'm thinking about wanting to hike Mount Fuji for my birthday. What do you think?" And she was totally down with this. She invited another friend from college, and she brought her husband. So there was four of us. Flew to Japan. I'd never been to Japan before, and we went and we hiked Mount Fuji, and it was like the hardest thing I ever done besides doing a marathon. Mount Fuji was really hard. It took us 21 hours to complete the whole thing. We ended up sleeping up there as well. I was doing a lot of research before this trip. I was reading all these articles, and one article that I pulled up, it says something about Mount Fuji being like 12,000 feet or something like that. And I was like, what?
Mhm.
No way. Because I swear it was like 1,000 or 2,000 something, because I read an article that said that. And there's a mountain out here in Oahu called Stairway to Heaven. And I've done that 5 times. And I think it's like about 2,000 feet. And so when I read this article that I thought where it said like 1,000, 1,500 feet, or maybe it was 3,000. Anyway, I was like, that's nothing, like I've done
Yeah.
Stairway to Heaven. If I have to do Stairway to Heaven twice, that's fine. But this article said it was like over 12,000 feet. So I went back into my folder on my laptop that had all these saved articles that I was researching of, and I reread that article, and it said like it was like 2,000 something meters, which if you convert into feet is over 12,000 feet. So I was like, shoot, I'm going to like Japan in 2 weeks to like hike a mountain, and being so high that I've never been that high before. So when we did it, I experienced high altitude sickness and pulmonary edema. Like my face swelled up and my lips turned cyanotic. It turned blue because the oxygen was so thin up there. It was a great experience. I always tell myself some things like, you go through some things, you got to remember the things that you've been through before, because you probably went through something harder. So these things that are coming up, these obstacles, are probably not as hard as some things that you've already been through. So remember that, remember those lessons, and then tackle whatever's in front of you.
I love that. It's also good to put it out there. When you go and climb a mountain, you have to have like experience to actually go out and do these things
Yeah, you
because
do.
even your body need to acclimate to the altitude. And I'm just like,
Yeah,
heck.
yeah, it does.
I'm
It
glad you
does.
made it back down safely.
They were so like at the base they were selling like oxygen tanks that I saw other people, having, and I was like, maybe you should get that. But like my three friends, none of them bought it. So I was like, okay, I'm not gonna buy it. But we were like, as the higher we were getting, I was like regretting that. I was like, oh man, I should have bought that tank of oxygen, because I'm kind of needing it right now. And like no amount of all the workouts I was doing prepared me for this. So I was like, yeah, so it's good to do your research and make sure, like for me, at least, I like to control as much of the situation as possible, by preparing beforehand, and just know that, sometimes unforeseen, unexpected circumstances can happen. But like with this, I thought I was like super prepared, but no, I was not. But yeah, I survived.
Well, I'm glad you survived. That's always been who you are, and that's just the way that you've been able to succeed and do so much. So, with everything that's going on, so what's next for Jackie?
Some things, especially what's going on in the world right now, me being in the military, there's some things that will probably might happen that, that'll, like take me away from home for a little bit. But when I get back, we're looking into moving back to Washington State sometime next year, trying to pursue a more advanced degree, and then hopefully get into some real estate investments, because really want to spend more time together rather than having to be physically somewhere else for 12 whole hours. So that's our goal. That's our plan.
Yes.
Uh,
So now, with Dear Sunga, it's all about trying to empower women. I always feel like the good girlfriends that I've always had have always been the ones that I've always kind of moved forward with and just kind of go together, push each other to be better versions of ourselves. So I think that's what I want to do with Dear Sunga. Is just kind of have to tell the story of the women that are doing great because I feel like there's just so many young ones who aspire and just like listening to podcasts, listening to other people's story, and can foresee myself being that person. So I also know one of the things I know really well about you is that you love being an aunt. You're like always praising your nieces and nephew. You're just like, yep, this is them. And so I'm just thinking of that, your nieces, and like if you could give them one piece of advice to being who they are and what they can become, what would that be?
my dad had always said growing up that if you hang out with thieves, you become a thief yourself. And so I think that's why you and I have been friends for so long, or we've been friends with, Tui and other people that are doing great things, because we we gravitate towards that same energy to motivate each other, to cheer for one another, and not be around negative folks, because that's also contagious. Life has taken me through many many different paths, but I've always tried to keep learning and build a life that reflects my values. I don't have any talent. I can't sing. I don't play any instruments. I was never naturally gifted, but what I lack in natural ability, I make up for in hard work. And over time, that becomes your superpower. What I would tell my kids, and I call them my kids because they are my kids, almost over 40 of them, that you don't always have to conform to what is generally done or believed. Sometimes you can create a new path that the next generation can see and follow. I didn't necessarily live my life trying to be an example, but I've always tried to live my life with values that are important to me that leave a positive impression for my kids. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is create your own path and walk it boldly. So I just do what I do. I don't lead with words. I try to lead through example.
You're doing an amazing job. So,
Yeah, they're all good kids, They're all good kids, all of them.
I know you're always so proud of them. You just have this passion for people. Whenever I meet with you, you're always pushing people to be at their best. And I think that's always been you. And that's what I love about you. So I appreciate you taking the time today to connect. I know you're doing it for me, but I do think you have an amazing story. You definitely have a grit that I think a lot of people can feel inspired by.